After the reveal of Doom: The Dark Ages, I was extremely excited and went complete media blackout on the game. I watched zero trailers, read zero articles, listened to zero interviews about the game. I wanted to go in as blind as possible, but even with taking effort to do that, I wasn't able to escape every piece of information coming my way via things like stream chatters. Not the end of the world, but before that, we have to talk about this video's sponsor, Encore. Encore is the place to be shopping if you are in the market for collecting video games and trading cards. When you're hunting for hidden gems to round out your collection, Encore is the alternative to be checking out if you're tired of finding dead ends on places like eBay and live stream shopping. Which, if you're a fan of my content, then you know how much I enjoy collecting the classics like PS2 action games. You have the option between buy now purchases like this Way of the Samurai from seller Blaine, or taking a crack at auctions. The simple ability to bid by swiping, or using the max bid feature to set your limit and allowing the system to bid up until that point. It leaves avenues for users who want to watch the bid like a hawk, or come back at the end and swoop in for the victory last minute, as long as you make sure to save the auction so you get notified when there are 5 minutes left. Encore takes trust and safety seriously, with having all sellers be ID verified, and Encore guarantees to protect your purchases when items do not come as described. There are tons of giveaways in the app that are completely free to enter. You don't even pay anything if you win, including shipping. Get up to $200 in credit to spend on Encore by using my link in the description below to download Encore on the iOS or Android app stores now. I booted up the game with a massive smile on my face, and that smile sadly drained over the course of the few hours of my first session, as the reality came crashing down that I was not enjoying the game at all. I think that there is something to be enjoyed by others, but after playing through the game, I have come to the conclusion that this isn't something for me. Maybe it will grow on me in time. Some games just don't have that appealing of a first playthrough, or you have to learn to love it, but in its current state, I hate the game and I hate the eventual response I know I'm going to receive because I don't like the game. I'm not even going to say it's bad. I just don't like it. There is a lot of cool stuff in this game that I do like, but as a full package in its current state, I find the game extremely disappointing. Before I get into what makes me not enjoy this game, I want to talk about the stuff I like, because there is actually quite a bit. Firstly, I think the setting is super cool. I love the mix of medieval and sci-fi, giant castles, and knights in armor combined with cybernetics is such a cool aesthetic. It's bulky in the same way that technology and sci-fi media circa 1997 into 1990 were, before everything became clear screen, sterile, blue and white, hologram bullshit, which this game does have some sections that do fall into that category, but the stuff that I like vastly outweighs the stuff that I dislike. I spent a lot of time just stopping to take in a lot of the scenery because the locales look incredible. Graphically, the game looks good, but I don't think it looks good enough to A, warrant the forced ray tracing, and B, warrant the amount of issues other people are having with the game performance-wise. The game ran perfectly fine for me, and I didn't experience any crashing, but I also do have a 4080 Super and a 9800X 3D processor, so I imagine I'm having a better rig than the average PC gamer running into issues that is leaving the angry reviews on the Steam page. I really like the designs for your arsenal of weapons. They are the perfect sweet spot between bulky, weird designs that look extremely cumbersome and something that actually makes sense as a weapon, sleek enough that you can discern what they are, but overly designed enough to have personality. The three standout weapons of the lineup that I really fell in love with was the tungsten sphere gun, the starting shotgun once you got the burst revolver upgrade, and the double cannon plasma rifle. I loved shooting the tungsten sphere gun into enemies and watching them explode into a red mist. In all honesty, the triple burst shotgun upgrade did make it feel a lot more like a revolver, but I miss Doom having a cool pistol. The pistol in Doom 2016 had an awesome design, but I did not enjoy it, and Eternal just outright got rid of it. The electricity upgrade that bounces from enemy to enemy with the plasma cycler was incredibly fun to use and see enemies just chain explode like I'm playing Nazi zombies with the Wunderwaffe. All of the weapons are fine and enjoyable enough to use, but part of me does wish that we had more weird and out there guns like the tungsten sphere launcher. It's by far the most unique weapon of the lineup, something that doesn't feel like it's just filling the niche of shotgun, machine gun, plasma weapon, rocket launcher, ballista. The shield has some pretty satisfying and fun features like the shoulder tackling into enemies from high up ledges. This felt incredibly good. I was happy anytime I saw that the level design allowed me to jump from a high place into a giant swarm of enemies and just tackle right into them like a fucking meteor crashing to earth and seeing them all explode around me. I'm pretty mixed on the shield as a whole, especially with how it's incorporated into target selection and traversal, but this is so addicting to do. To go hand in hand with enjoying the visual aesthetic, I ended up actually liking the cutscenes of this game quite a bit. I'm not someone who's coming to Doom for a story, like I don't give a shit what actually happened in the game, but everything looked really cool and the shot composition was engaging. The story itself is whatever. Personally, I don't really care for the surface level eldritch stuff near the end. Feels like it's there for people to go, whoa, it's Cthulhu! And while I complained in my review for Eternal that I thought the mythologizing of the Doomslayer was getting to the point of masturbatory, I can't help but think that while that certainly is the case here, he still looks cool as fuck. Yeah man, the story might mostly be, we got hype moments and aura, but the Doom guy does continue to be really cool, especially with his redesign. I love the cape. It really makes the Doom guy's silhouette super striking in every cutscene he's in. What can I say? I occasionally want to enjoy the we got hype moments and aura type story. The two things I knew going into this game is that they apparently made the game much slower compared to the previous two, and that they apparently removed glory kills. That's the curious thing about Doom the Dark Ages, because neither of these statements are really true. Glory kills are functionally still in this game, or in some cases straight up still in this game, but they're called glory strikes now and are extremely flaccid as you slowly swing your melee weapon of choice at an enemy as slow-mo triggers and they fall apart like a dying Lego Star Wars character. Sometimes when you do an aerial glory strike, it does do the old glory kills from the previous two games, but are way slower, which begs the question, why did they even bother getting rid of them in the first place for something way less satisfying feedback-wise, and way more pace-breaking gameplay-wise? I found that the glory strikes did not feel as snappy as the glory kills did in either 2016 or Doom Eternal. Initially, I thought that this must have been because they didn't have the range of Eternals. That Eternal allowed you to snap super far away into glory kills safely, which was broken in its own right if you really wanted to have that ball-crushing experience, but after going back and testing, Eternal seems to actually have about the same range as Dark Ages. After taking some time to compare both gameplay feels side by side and watching back footage from both of them side by side, I ended up coming up with a few theories of why I think I felt Eternal felt so much snappier. The first is because of Eternal's dash and double jump. I think they allow you to get those sweet invincibility frames and heals more accurately, faster, and safer compared to using the shield tackle or simply walking into range in Dark Ages. Those split seconds that the shield's aim requires you to make sure you're highlighting the right demon will never feel as smooth as an omnidirectional dash. And when you're frantically trying to do this in a split second, the game does have a habit of going for the wrong target, even someone directly behind who you're aiming at. Watching these two clips side by side in slow motion shows that they roughly have the same amount of distance between Doom Guy and the demon for these kills, but you'll notice that because of how fast Doom Eternal's melee speed is when you hit the button, even when I'm slightly out of range, I'm quickly able to cancel that animation right into the glory kill. Because of Dark Ages' comparatively slower melee speed, you really can't do this. The last point is that after watching my Dark Ages footage back and watching it in slow motion, it really appears that there isn't a consistent range. Sometimes I'm jumping super far, farther than you probably can do in Eternal, but then other times it seems like I'm in range and I just get left swatting at the open air doing nothing. And I'm feeling further disconnect because the regular melee attacks, especially the free follow-ups when you do a perfect parry, seem to have extreme range. Though the one thing I think Eternal for sure does better hands down from Dark Ages from doing this side-by-side comparison is snapping you into place for a glory kill when there is an elevation difference between you and the demon. So the arachnoids on the little platforms you have to climb usually timed out before I was able to get to them. The worst part of these glory strikes and the melee-centric focus of this game as a whole whole is the horrendous slowdown that is present for any melee-based attack. I seriously don't know why this is in the game to begin with, let alone lacking the ability to turn it off. By the time this video comes out, there is a good chance it will have a patched-in option to turn this off, and as of the day one of the game's official release, people were already talking about making mods and testing them, so even if it doesn't get patched in, there will likely be that by now. The slowdown is some of the worst gameplay feedback I have experienced. It really ruins all the impact the gameplay and animations could have. It's so overkill, and when you can do a decent amount of melee attacks in a row, later in the game when you have a bunch of upgrades, it feels like the game is trapped in slow motion. Even if this does get tackled one way or another, it still doesn't fix the fact that glory strikes and the melee combat feels limp as hell. It's really unfortunate that a huge facet of the combat I simply do not find satisfying or engaging and actively ruins the flow of fights for me. Gameplay pacing as a whole is just puzzling. I was told that they wanted to make the game slower, but it's really not. You can get pretty damn fast in Doom the Dark Ages, especially near the end with upgrades to weapons like the Skull Shredders. The big thing about Dark Ages is that it allows you to get fast, but it doesn't allow you to stay fast. For some reason, lateral movement can completely halt all momentum in scenarios like when you aren't holding forward. I even went back and recorded some demonstrations with a keyboard input overlay to give the viewers an idea of what I'm doing, what happens when I am doing this, and hopefully illustrates why it bothers me. Though some of the times I lost the sprint, I don't exactly know why it happened one time and didn't happen another. I don't know if it's because the angle my character is moving at, or if it's because I've zigzagged left and right too many times. One potential answer is that in watching back my footage frame by frame, in the time that I lose momentum, I see that the input reader is registering that I'm pressing A and D at the same time in one frame. After counting it, it happens for 12 frames. So either the overlay just made an error, or the game registers that for 1/5 of a second I had both pressed at the same time and decided to completely turn it off. This might be the case of the game being overly aggressive in reading, keeping, and queuing up player inputs. One thing it does that I wasn't planning on bringing up in the video itself until just now is that if you mash to try and get one of the glory strikes to happen, the game will then play out subsequent melee attacks after you get out of the canned animation, whether you are still pressing the glory kill button or not. Alright, addendum upon addendum upon addendum. After going back and reviewing it some more, doing more testing, I was able to replicate this without the overlay showing I pressed A and D at the same time, so I really don't know what's going on here. And to be fair to Doom the Dark Ages and its movement, this is also something that is a problem in 2016 and Eternal. But by now I had hoped they would have removed something like this and allowed for the game to have a much more interesting, fluid feeling momentum-based movement, because not only does it hurt my enjoyment of the Dark Ages, it also retroactively makes it harder for me to go back and enjoy the previous two games. They feel way slower than I remember. These games just feel so much stiffer than they otherwise would be. Though there is one thing that is working in Eternal's favor that Dark Ages doesn't have, and that's its dash, which helps obfuscate the fact that your movement carries no momentum and that certain actions can grind you to a complete halt. One of the shining examples that further exacerbates Dark Ages' stiff feeling movement is the fact that it actively punishes you and holds you back from doing bunny hops. If you jump 2 times in a row while sprinting, for some reason the game turns the sprint off and grinds you to a halt. And if we want to go back to the point I made earlier about how Dark Ages handles inputs, the game doesn't even feel smooth in trying to get your character to sprint again. I kept finding myself having to mash shift multiple times to start sprinting. The FPS genre has had a lot of shakeups since the release of Doom 2016 and even Eternal, so in a very populated market, movement like this just doesn't feel good to me when other more fluid momentum-based options exist. How unappealing the movement of this game is only became more apparent when taking the level design into account. It is the thing I feel took such a massive step down from Eternal. The game has these large open area levels like the Siege Part 1, which amount to mostly open fields connected by a few dirt paths with nothing really interesting in them. Serious Sam-ass level design. The levels are also littered with invisible walls, so exploring is also pretty limited when you want to try and be creative, like trying to enter arenas from side ramps like this. The game wants you to go to the entrance despite visually depicting other methods if you are curious enough to find them. There are a few rare occasions where the level design does do interesting stuff, and that only makes it all the more annoying how boring the rest of it is. How traversal feels way less engaging even when the platforming from the last game could be seen as bare bones and basic. I personally found it fun enough, but when most of the traversal in this game is just shield tackling into walls that have a green circle on it or a floating green Sonic ring, it has me wishing for better times that weren't even all that special to begin with. I've always been pretty terrible at finding secrets in retro-style FPS games to the point I wonder how you are supposed to find these things without a guide, but this is too far in the complete opposite direction that it just makes me wonder what the point of even having secrets like this beyond a checklist for players to have something to waste their time on. This is what a secret amounts to in this game. Seriously, they are almost all just look slightly up or turn left on a mission critical path. Eventually, I just gave up and stopped bothering with them because they felt like a fucking boring waste of time. Visual clarity felt like it was at an all-time low in this game. It was something I brought up in my reviews for Doom Eternal, but the vignettes and decals that they put on your screen when your health is low or you're hit by certain attacks, like the Cyber Demon's chain gun or the Pinky's bite, is absurd. If there is a setting in the launch version of the game, I couldn't find it to turn this shit off. What I was hoping would be the setting I was looking for turns out to only shift the actual HUD itself, when the two things I want is to be able to turn off these decals and make it so when your health is critically low it takes up about 50% less screen real estate. On a first time playthrough, or hell, any playthrough for that matter, it's going to have you drop to critical health a decent amount on ultraviolent with pretty aggressive enemies that are going to be right on top of you constantly, especially if you are continuously parrying their onslaught of green flashing bullshit while getting shot in the ass elsewhere, which is continuing the issue of constant slowdown. I know my health is critically low. You play a sound cue when it drops to that. I just don't need that red shit to remind me of the rule of thirds from my high school digital media class. Please make a setting like the HUD shifting one, but for this visual effect. I am fine with it to some degree, just not this much. For some reason, all of the demons got redesigned in this game so that they were brown and gray, in a game where you are mostly fighting in places that are brownish gray. So to make enemies and their incoming attacks have readability, they have this green flash for all of their parryable attacks. The cacophony of flashing lights this results in, with the combination of your health constantly fluctuating when getting hit, then going back up as you kill enemies, and the shmup-like projectiles you are meant to dodge and parry, causes me to have a seriously bad headache. Yeah, that photosensitivity warning when booting up this game was definitely needed. I don't even have epilepsy. I can't imagine playing this as someone who does. You can change the color, but that does not help the core issue of the flashing lights. I already know people are tripping over themselves to tell me in the comments that you can turn off the parry flashes in the settings, but then you lose the readability of what actions you have to react to, because in the moment I can't tell what the fuck I'm looking at half the time. I can't tell what is about to hit me. I just know because I see the flashing light something is going to. Turning them off doesn't help that enemies themselves blend in with the environments too much, being particularly hard for me to see in the nighttime or darker levels, doubly so when my HP was low. The revenants are actually easier to see when they turn into that blue ghost form. I even tried the desaturated world accessibility setting to see if this will help, and it really doesn't, because it still keeps the core issue of I can't tell what the fuck I'm looking at. It's just now they are amorphous blobs of a color of my choosing. Things like the superheated armor you are supposed to break off of enemies with shield tosses becomes too hard to see with this setting on, even at its lowest percentage. The monocolor blobs continue to ruin the game's art direction and design because I can't tell what I'm looking at. You may as well be fighting textureless colored shapes in a developer debug room. I've tried everything the game currently has to offer and nothing felt good. I bet it looks completely readable comparable to someone just watching the video or pausing to take a screenshot to tell me how this isn't a problem for them, as if this completely invalidates that it is one for me, but actively playing the game is a completely different beast. In the moment, in frantic firefights, it does not have that split-second readability that the other games have. It's all just a blur to me. I have been a champion of being able to tune the experience how you want to with advanced options in the settings menu for some time now, but this game is really pushing that belief to its absolute limits. It feels like the line has been blurred of what is the designed experience from the developers and what we are supposed to tune ourselves as the player. It's cool that you can do this, but does the player really need the ability to make granular changes to things like projectile speeds, the duration enemies are stunned for, and the game speed itself from 100% to 150%? I look at a lot of these settings and can't help but feel like these are the things that should have been designed by the developers. Yes, the default difficulty settings do have variation, but when you go into the itemized menu and see what they change, you realize that it's really not that much different between Nightmare and Ultraviolent. Maybe there is some setting combination that would have made my playthrough perfect. A combination that would have made me go, yeah, Doom the Dark Ages is my game of the year, no question, nothing can beat it from here on out for the rest of the year. But I don't want to have to keep sitting here and fiddling with these settings over and over again to get to that. When the default difficulty settings do not feel good out of the box, there becomes a point in fine-tuning the experience that I feel like they should have done themselves in the first place. I shouldn't be designing the game for them to find the fun. The fun should be there from the get-go, and these settings should only exist to further enhance the experience, which it's not doing for me. At what point does it turn into a game that has no clear focus and design you are meant to experience, where the design intent becomes an afterthought because you, the player, can fuck with the settings to the point your experience is completely different and unrecognizable from everyone else who has default settings? Don't somehow misconstrue this as saying that accessibility settings are bad. No, that's not what I'm saying. I just do not fuck with how this game is designed, and it feels like, yeah, these settings are here to patch up whatever you may have a problem with. I thought this approach was fine in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, but I really couldn't put my finger on why it's not here. It might be in part because of one of the major design spaces of this game that I do not fuck with, and that is the parry. I don't want to put myself in the anti-parry camp that has cropped up in recent months with the massive uptick of games having parries as a catch-all defensive mechanic, in the same way that every game had a bow and arrow at the tail end of the 7th gen and start of the 8th gen. For example, I loved Expedition 33, which is another game almost entirely based around parrying as its main gimmick, but the way it's implemented and designed around in this game I just don't find enjoyable. I've already talked about the green flashing parry signals and the horrible slowdown that you cannot turn off, but the other aspect of it is that it makes a lot of enemies feel boring and samey to fight. It boils them down to parry the incoming green flash or focus down the one part of their shmup projectile wave that is green while the rest is red and will hurt you. Yeah, you control the buttons you push, but you're the ones who designed the game this way. If this game wasn't so clearly centralized around always doing this, then why can't you dash anymore? Why is parrying or just holding up the shield the only defensive option you have besides shooting guys to death when they're jumping right on top of you? Why is it so massively rewarding to always hit a perfect parry and do something like the free melee follow-up it gives you? It's not even hard to do. It's actually the most brain-dead Simon Says aspect of this game. I turned it down from the default lowest it goes to from the basic difficulty options, since the parry window doesn't shrink after Ultraviolent, and it's still fucking piss easy. The range is 2 feet away from you in every direction, so it's not even like you have to time it or position well. The game does it for you. Look how fucking far I am, and I send this shit back to the boss. This time it's fucking behind me and I still parry it somehow. It becomes a chicken or the egg situation where I don't know if the parry can redirect shit so far away from you because every green projectile has the propensity to always curve away from you from my experience, or if the projectiles do this because your range is so far. Either way, I find myself fishing for these parries because it benefits is just too good not to. And after hearing that, if your response is, "Oh, so you want it to be harder, well I'll show you," and make the parry window super unforgiving, that would not magically make me like the system. It would just make it all the more apparent that the game is so pigeonholed into this boring as fuck mechanical implementation. It turns the game into either parrying the bum-rushing assholes running 90 miles an hour at you, or die while getting flashbanged by green shit. This isn't even mentioning the constant bug I kept running into where I couldn't raise my shield, so I couldn't even do the one thing the game is all about. Eventually, I realized that if I attempt to throw the shield enough, it will eventually do it and I'll be able to raise my shield again. I hate how you get pushed back by parrying a good majority of the attacks from larger enemies. The game's tagline was stand and fight, but the constant shuffling around and scrambling to get back right on top of them feels like shit. It's one of the many things that feels at odds with its own design and self, that it was put there because the idea of blocking a hit so hard it pushes you back and you get right back up and get on top of them is cool. Yeah, that visually is cool for cutscenes and fight scene cinematics, but I don't think it feels good in actual gameplay. If the feature bloat of this game with the ideas that vaguely go together wasn't enough, eventually the shield gets another further expounded upon feature that triggers every time you parry. These runes include an auto shoulder turret, Virgil summon swords, stunning nearby enemies, and an earthquake fissure. This was something that I was just not enamored with in the slightest. It was bad enough that most of the upgrades of this game were boring as shit and amount to reducing cooldowns for your melee or applying an elemental property when you hit someone. This is one step above plus 5% fire damage with your bullets, so I just mainly stuck with the earthquake ability since I liked it the most. When you successfully parry, it shoots a 50-foot fissure in the direction of the attacker, though I couldn't tell if it was actually working half of the time due to the terrain cutting it short, or if the terrain is simply just making the visual not project properly and cutting it off halfway. As I've mentioned time and time again, the feedback is pretty bad for a lot of things in this game, and this is one of the many examples that half the time I couldn't tell if it was even doing anything. Some smaller scale annoyances are that the music is nowhere near as good as the previous two games. I feel bad for the guy who had to follow up Mick Gordon, especially with how the situation played out. The music of the game is fine, it just doesn't elicit anywhere near the same reaction as any of the tracks from 2016 or Eternal did. I also couldn't find a mix level where it felt like the music was banging enough where it didn't get droned out from the action. A lot of it just sounds like what you imagine would show up when you put badass metal music to game to in a YouTube search bar. Sound design as a whole was a bit hit or miss for me, where some guns sound amazing and others like the skull shredders feel extremely flaccid. The combination of the really subdued sound design and how easy it is for the projectiles to blend in with the art direction of the level design makes the gun really feel like I am shooting something right out of a laser tag arena. I aim where the enemies are and they fall apart like Lego Star Wars characters from a near invisible projectile I struggle to see. A real wet fart of a gun, and it's a shame because it was the one I was the most excited for from seeing that one store page screenshot. It does get better once you ramp the guns up, but that should have been the default of what these guns sounded like. Their fully ramped version should have been the baseline, and when they were fully ramped should be like Fuller Auto in I Divine Cybermancy. Or using the right click from the nail gun in Ultra Kill. I want that shit peaking. I want it to be undiscernible what sounds it is making. It should sound like a piece of metal got stuck in a jet turbine. A lawnmower just ran over a hand grenade. The gimmick levels of the giant mech and the dragon are also extremely basic and disappointing. Maybe if I was enjoying the base gameplay of Doom the Dark Ages more, I would have found these somewhat novel and more enjoyable than I did. Something akin to a cute gameplay mashup found in a PS2 game or an early 360 nifty game, but in reality they're very basic, overstay their welcome, and I just did not find them interesting. They sour an already meh experience I was having with the game as a whole. The mech, despite having a really sick design and intro, just feels like an even more watered down version of the melee combat. You dodge left or right to trigger slowdown and punch an enemy when your big meter is full. It's like Gundam Evolution, where they put a bunch of miniatures around you to sell the illusion you are a giant mech, but you control like a regular guy with a sprint button. The dragon is even worse, with bland as shit Simon Says gameplay where you lock into place and dodge left, right, up, or down in front of a hemorrhoid until it explodes and then you move on to the next one. I can't believe they came up with flight combat and it amounts to standing in place and aiming down sights like a third-person game on a fucking dragon. Even Drakengard has better dragon combat and people act like this is one of the worst games ever made and its story is the only redeeming quality. To their credit, they actually managed to make a good final boss to end the game on. Not a particularly high bar to pass, given how dogshit Eternal and its DLC bosses were, and how forgettable 2016's was, to the point that I thought the Cyber Demon was the final boss and not the Arachnoid until I went back to look at it. It was a fun and engaging back and forth, and they were clearly so proud of this fight that they made you do it 3 times in the span of an hour in 2 back-to-back levels. I'm so sad about Doom the Dark Ages because it was one of the big releases this year that I was really looking forward to, and I ended up not liking it at all. I can see why others do, it just doesn't appeal to me. Maybe in time I will grow to love it, maybe some patches will tweak some things, but if you're gonna go into my comments and write me an essay about how I played the game wrong or did not get it, then save your breath. I don't even think that the game is bad per se. Sure, at times it does feel like a mishmash of ideas that are at odds with themselves, but I think other people could easily find Doom the Dark Ages to be their favorite in the trilogy, possibly one of their favorite games ever. I am unfortunately not one of those people, but that fact should not affect your enjoyment of it. If you've made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you for watching as always. If you really like my videos, then please leave a like and comment and pass the video around. If you want to see more videos like this and really help support the channel, either become a patron on Patreon or a YouTube member. In my personal opinion, Patreon helps the most as long as you aren't going through Apple, which takes a percentage of its own. But if that is unavailable to you, then YouTube memberships are completely fine. I'm now going to shout out all of my $5 and up patrons and members who really help support the channel. Comrade Video, Mr. Spoo, Harrison, Gnome, Bad Gamer for Life, Sam, Uncut Ninja Dope, Leo, Average Joe 777, Overture Saint, Morgan, Burley, Bully, Chikun Highwind, Dencha, Dev Welkin, Fish Kami, Friday Night Fragging, Kevin Velasquez, Maxi89C, Metal Cactus, Medi Not the Bad Guy, MGS Duh, Quartz, Samuel Egan, Saiyan Heggy, Scary Dinosaur, TV Head, Vaso, Valetti, Alec Joseph, Ben Johnson, Ben Olberg, Buckets, Chichometrius, Ekfrazo, Hardleg Joe, Leon, Lotto, Neutral Guy, Nicholas Pedinato, Sean the Berserker Fighter, Shisaji, Slemf Tingle, Tabriz Sadiq, Turbo Chicken, and Jacob Hamilton. Thank you so much, everyone. My next video is the Raito Kuzunoha duology review. If you become a YouTube member or patron, you can look at the first part of it covering the first game. I hope to have the full video out before the remake, but if that doesn't happen, part 1 will just go live for everybody. Follow me on Blue Sky and Twitter to stay up to date on upcoming videos, and as always, thank you for watching and see you next time.